we live in a society of loneliness. This is the second part of what I'm getting ready to say. This is a very ambitious program tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And this is now at least some a component of the loneliness issue in our society, is that we chose the convenience of remote work because it's better for us in the short term, but in the long term, it was just one more way to separate ourselves from fellow people, from the fellow man. So before I get into the second part of this beautiful topic, I want to throw it back to Dave so that maybe he could unpack some of what Julian just said.
I think there's two issues here that are not being overlooked, but I would like to enter into the conversation. And I think they are directly related to one another. It is both the principle of collaboration as well as balance of power. And I think, first of all, whether or not, take the needs of the company out of it just for a moment, just so we can come back to it. But as far as whether remote work is in the best interest of the worker or not, I mean, you could find statistical data one way or the other that would indicate an aggregate answer to that, possibly. But it's really a thing that everyone would have to decide for themselves. For example, if somebody is in a miserable marriage or has, you know, say an in-law or a relative living with them that they have a miserable relationship with, like remote work could be the worst thing in the world for their mental health. They could be like, get me the out of here into whatever office I can find, even if it's a street corner. Like, so that is a reality for a number of people for whatever reason. An example of that tangentially is that during the pandemic, when there were lockdowns and people were not really able to easily leave their house, domestic violence reporting went way up. And so that would be an example of an environment where remote work would be, I think, very detrimental to the health of people that were stuck in that type of situation. So for some people, going to work, whatever that work may be a mental health kind of break to help alleviate some of the home stress. The opposite could also be true. If someone either lives alone or has pets that they love hanging around, or plants, or just love their home for whatever reason, or just absolutely hate their job or their boss or their coworkers, then remote work may absolutely be what's best for their mental health. But so I think that's hard to talk about from a distance away. Like, that really specifics matter on that, as far as what someone's specific situation is and what the positives and negatives are for them individually between going to a physical location for work compared to doing whatever their job is from their own home or some other location. Now, the reason that I mentioned a balance of power as well as collaboration is, I think the problem is when this decision of whether or not someone is going to work remotely, assuming obviously that their job allows for it. Like, for example, a restaurant worker, like a waiter or server, a bartender, like, it would be damn near difficult, if not impossible, for them to do that job remotely for obvious reasons. So assuming that the actual nature of the job itself is not what's causing the tipping point one way or the other, if all things are being considered equal, and we'll get to productivity in a moment, but if the nature of the job can be done either in person or remotely, I think the problem comes when, one way or another, that decision is not being made collaboratively and is being forced upon somebody. It was forced upon people for public health reasons to have to work remotely, to have to school their children remotely, to, you know, during the phase of the pandemic. And that was incredibly stressful for many number of reasons. But what it does is it took away people's locus of control. It took away people's ability to feel like they had a say or a control over the outcome of what was happening in their own lives. And again, that was no one's fault per se, because it was the nature of what society was facing at that time. And it was what it was. But that doesn't negate the stress response to that. Now, when you take away the pandemic element, and people have discovered that they can work remotely and that there are significant benefits to them for that purpose, then it can be it can cause a lot of bitterness if somebody who is their boss or their manager or whatever is saying, I don't care if you would like to, I am ordering you that you will come back to blah, 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 blah. And when you have someone, when it's not a collaborative decision, when you're just being ordered to go back, then I think that can cause a lot of a stress response and a lot of cortisol and irritation and stuff. Not dissimilar to what was caused when people were told that they had to stay home and figure out how to work from there. It's when people feel like they don't have a choice, that they are being dictated to, and that another person, especially, is having sole control over how they are spending such a major portion of their lives, not only just from time, but also mental and emotional energy. I think that's where a lot of that strife and that disconnect is. I think if a business, if a manager, whatever, if it's a conversation as opposed, and it's a genuine conversation where there is back and forth and people can hear each other out and take that into account in good faith, then I think you're more likely to come up with, whether it be like, okay, you can work from home on these days. Can you come into the office on these days, or whatever, for this purpose or that purpose, whatever that may be. I think when it's a discussion, I think that can be healthy. I think when it's being ordered or dictated to, which is what it's kind of come down to, especially if people are being ordered back to the office, like what a lot of Silicon Valley companies like Microsoft and I don't want to list down a whole bunch of names and then get one wrong, but when people who would rather work remotely are being ordered back to the office, no matter what they think about it, I think that's where there's the disconnect. Now, as far as the social element of work, I think it is true what Jason has said before, that a lot of people absolutely despise their coworkers. And it is also true that working alongside people that are going through similar experiences is kind of a tribal, and I don't mean that in a negative way, a valuable social building exercise that can build friendships and sometimes romances and all kinds of things. That's absolutely true as well. Again, it depends on what someone's social circle is. If somebody has just moved into a town for a job and they don't know anybody, then it might be in their best interest to go to an office to try to meet some people. If they are moving to an area to take a job where they grew up and they already have a bunch of family members, or they're looking after a sick relative, then it might be in their best interest to work remotely as much as possible. Again, it's hard to speak about that in an aggregate. So I think it could contribute to someone's loneliness. I don't think it's guaranteed or an immediate absolute reason.